So I just wanted, I'll start off by asking you, would you say your full name for me?
My name is Marva Mento Hackney.
Okay. And then do you have any questions about the project or anything that I'm working on first that you want to ask me, or anything you want to talk about first?
Yes, give me just a little orientation to what you're doing and why you're doing it.
So on the surface, this project is going to be giving me 3 credits for a class for an independent study. So I'm going to be completing a National Register nomination for the Springfield Log School to get it on the register to help protect it a little bit longer is the hope. And then I'm also going to be working with Terry Howard to be finding some funding resources and things like that too, so that hopefully we can get more grants and more scholarships or more anything really for the school, just to keep it preserved longer. But that's sort of the surface level of it. On a more personal note, I started researching this place, and Jennifer Lewis, she's the director of our Center for Community Design and Preservation, and she's worked with Terry before on this a little bit. So Jennifer explained kind of the history of the place to me, and I realized that there is something so special about Springfield Log School. And just like a lot of Black histories, it seems like this one is starting to fade, and I really wanted to make sure that nobody lost this, because it seems like if there's not a lot of people working on it, it might get lost. So I just really wanted to make sure, and that's kind of the reason I'm doing the project. So really, I'm just going about documenting it as much as I can, as much as I can, especially from people like you who have a really active connection to the school. So.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
It seems like a worthwhile
It definitely
project from my perspective, at least.
It very much is, yeah.
Has Sherry shared with you some of the pictures so you kind of know what it looks like, what the cabin looked like?
Not really, not 100% yet. I found some older pictures, but not a lot from Terry herself. But I am going to be planning a trip out to see her and see if she can show me some of those pictures.
Okay, because she sent me 2 brochures with pictures of the cabin.
Okay.
A little bit in its earlier decay, because it's decayed a good bit now.
It has, yeah, unfortunately.
And it would be good for you to see what it's like, because it's real unique, made out of all logs.
And I got to go in it the other day. I got to go in it in November and sort of explore the place a little and see what it was like.
But I thought you couldn't go in it because you went in it because they said the flooring is not necessarily safe, but you were just...
It's not really 100% safe. It's definitely not safe for people who don't know what they're doing. But somebody like me, I've been in old buildings a few times here and there, so I feel pretty comfortable walking around in there.
Okay.
And then...
so you do know what it looks like now?
Yeah, I do have what it looks like now. I've got plenty of pictures of that. I've seen it in person, and it's awesome. It's a really
that's
cool
better
place.
than look. I didn't know you had seen.
Is there anything that's changed a lot about the building over the years? Like, has anything about the exterior changed a lot that you've noticed or seen, anything like that?
Just decaying and
just general decaying. Okay.
Kind of dropping down into the foundation. Is going.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not holding up as it did.
Yeah.
I'm sure because it had to be my older sisters, who are all passed away, and they were in school. I was born in 1938, so they had to been in school, probably in the early 30s. So for it to last from 30 to even stand from 30 to now, say something about the construction of it.
It definitely
and not
does.
Had any, constant. Most people would have been constantly upgrading it, but it has not had any of that to my knowledge.
Okay, cool. So then... You mentioned that your siblings would have been going there, or they would have been in school in the early 30s. How many siblings do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, no, not at all. I had 5, but I'm the only surviving sister at this point.
Okay. And are you the youngest?
I am the youngest of all.
Okay. And you said that you did attend the school, but you attended from... Kindergarten to 7th grade?
Yes.
Okay. And then 8th grade is when you moved up to the school up the road, correct?
Yeah, up to Crawfordsville school. That school was still black, but it was a school where they consolidated all the little small schools around in the county for blacks.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's very cool.
They consolidated and brought all of us together. So we had schools, children from different buses did buses. Prior to that, we had no buses.
Okay.
Where I live, buses would pass. We would have to walk. And buses would pass with the white kids and some they throw things out of the windows. Mm. But we walked to school from kindergarten to 7th. Not 7th. I think the buses start picking us up maybe in about 5th grade.
5th grade?
Yeah, I think we finally got buses.
Do you know about how far it was that you walked to get to school?
We walked about 5 miles.
One way? One way.
Yes, and it was a river. It was a river between the school and where we were at our homes. And during the wintertime, my dad, they had a log, and we'd have to kind of sit on that log, so then it would be cold and we'd be wet in the back from school. And a lot of kids learn how to do this kind of walk. Like this, they learn how to. I couldn't
like an
do
army crawl. Yeah.
They would go cross it so fast, but I got better at it as I got older.
Wow, that's crazy. That's wild.
When I look at what how we persevered, mm-hmm. and did all that to make sure we got an education, and then went on to attend some of the best colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. It says a lot about our ability to not give up, to persevere.
Okay. What about, was it the school? Was it because Springfield School was so special that you guys persevered as long as you did? Or was it just because you guys were so adamant about going to school, period, getting an education? Was it just because it was Springfield, or was it just because of just really wanting to get an education or making sure you got an education?
I think it was because all black parents and all black kids wanted an education. After this school was built, there were children who came who had no good schools near them. Their parents let them come stay in families that was near the school.
Wow.
So that they could get a better education. So it was not, I don't think anything special about Springfield School, except blacks wanted their kids to be educated.
And it was African American built as well, which makes it so special. The fact that it was, I believe I read that it was black property owners who used them from their properties.
This was my brother-in-law's father who owned a lot of property. I guess you could say an admirable thing could be about black history is some of the slave masters, where they had relationships, that, with black people that worked, the black people that worked on their plantation. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, some of them left property
to them
with those children. Mm-hmm. That kind of happened in my families. My dad owned about 105 or so acres of land, and it was passed down through Hackney. I forgot how far back. Most of us can go back to about 5 generations of being mixed with white owners.
Wow, okay.
Because because of our complexion. Because Africans, for the most part, were darker complexion.
Okay.
So, when I got a girlfriend, I can go to her house and she kind of have it set up so you can look at her heritage. And I say, what are you doing with this white man? And then she said, that was my father's grandfather. She said, I'm like 2/3 white.
Wow.
So she got pictures back from I've heard of it, but I can't go back through my family.
Yeah. I know a lot of, I've been doing a lot of resources this past February for Black History Month, and a lot of them have found like genealogical databases and things like that of trying to help more Black people find their family and lineage, because I've seen that story a lot. You can only find like 2, 3, 4 generations back before it just kind of stops, and you can't find any record of it. And I found one recently that was in Decatur, I believe. I think it was, or maybe it was just Fulton County. But they did one through church records, and they found one guy was able to trace his lineage back like 8 or 9 generations. It was pretty cool. He found like a really long lineage, but you know, he's one of the few. Not many people can find lineage that far back.
Right.
It's hard to find that, yeah. But so I'm gonna let me get some names from you. So you said your dad owned about 110 acres of land?
I think so.
Okay.
Some close to that.
Your dad was one of the original board members of the Springfield School, correct? It was
As I remember, I'm not. Somebody who has a record of it would know.
Okay, and it was Miles.
But his name was Miles, Miles.
Miles Hackney.
Hackney.
And do you happen to know his middle name by chance? His middle name by chance? Do you happen to know that, or did he have a middle name?
Not that I know of.
No. Okay. Do you happen to know when he was born, if you're willing to share that?
Yes, he was born. Let me think. He was born near the close of the century. Let's see.
Pretty close, I'm sure.
1870. I bet I'm going to be off. Because he was 93. And I don't mean 7. I mean 1880. Not 80. Oh, gosh. 80, yeah, it would be 1877, I think.
1877?
Okay. So, when the turn of the century is when my mom was born. I know she was born in 2020. You can remember 2020.
Okay.
No, not 2020.
1920?
1920.
1920, okay.
I'm sorry, 1900.
1900?
See, that's what I'm saying. My dad was born a little bit before 1900.
Okay, and your mom was born on 1900?
So that would be 1870, because he was 9 years older than my mom. So that would be that he was born in 1873, wouldn't it?
Okay, he was born 9 years before?
Yeah, he was 9 years older than mom. I know she was born in 1900.
Okay. So that would make him, if he was 19 or 9 years older, that would make it 1891, I believe. 1891 to 1900. Yeah, that's 9 years. So about that 1890, early 1890.
Oh, yeah.
Or do you think it was the 1870s? Do you think it was older before that?
No, it was maybe his birthday was 1870.
Okay.
1892. Would that make it right? Depending on when that birthday is.
That would be about 8 or 9 years older than mine, something like that.
Yeah. It was something, he could have been 8. He was something like 8 or 9. I'm not sure.
Okay, sometime late 1880s into 1890s, but just before the turn of the century. Okay. And what was your mother's name?
Her name was Ada, A-D-A. She didn't have a middle name that I know of.
And her married name was Hackney. Do you know her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Peek. P-E-E-K. We go to family reunions, and her family has an interesting heritage too. Her family was one of the first black families that owned a cotton gin in Crawfordsville. That was my mother's family. And this is her great granddad on my mother's side. He was one of the first senators, during the Reconstruction years. Mm-hmm. There were senators that were black that were sent to represent. Now, on my mother's side.
Your mother's father is who it was?
Uh-huh. My mother's father. Not my mother's father, but his father.
His father, okay. So her great-grandfather. Or her grandfather, your great-great.
So if they had, I don't know all the history about why they didn't continue to allow blacks, but maybe if they had continued, that blacks would be more integrated into the judicial and...
Probably, or one could hope so, I guess, yeah. My notes are crazy looking right now. Okay, so you are the youngest of 5. Let me double check I'm not missing anything to ask you right now. Oh, where did you live whenever you were attending the school? Where did you live? Do you happen to know like a road name or maybe an address if you can remember one? Or even a general direction from the school?
Because, like that, back then we didn't have like streets. But looked like it was near Highway 41, because we lived kind of very close to the Greene County line. That's the next county, okay. Union Point. And our mail came from Union Point, so our home was closer to Greene County, and I can't think of anything else with.
That's okay. It gives me a general idea. I'm just curious to see, because I knew that things like road names weren't going to be super easy to recall, even if they were in existence, but also things like, just in general, like where you guys were oriented around the school. I find that kind of interesting, because if you were walking 5 miles, then that means quite a few other kids probably were also walking about 5 miles.
We were farthest away.
Farthest away? Okay.
Most of the kids were closer in, because we were farthest away from the community. See, that whole little area had houses all along the streets where the school was. But we left that when we came down that road and crossed that bridge. Mm-hmm. We was going to a community closer to Union Point.
Okay.
But we were still in Taliaferro County, because we were not, I don't know whether they had any kind of school up in Union Point for blacks.
Yeah, I'm not.
Probably not.
I'm not sure if I recall one in any research. There could have been one and I just haven't come across it, but I don't know if I've seen one.
No, I don't remember where those kids went to school.
So one of
I'll have to ask somebody who can tell me about that. Aunts or uncles.
Yeah, sure.
They got to be older people to remember.
Yeah. So one thing I was going to ask too is, so was this a predominantly all black community that was Springfield, or were there white families sort of mixed in the bunch nearby, or was this like a pretty relatively rural area when you were attending school, or was it more of a, I won't say city because it wasn't a city, but were there white families nearby you guys, or was it pretty much only the black community that was around the Springfield area?
Okay, around the Springfield area, as I remember, that was primarily all black. But over where I live, there were 2 or 3, I knew about a half mile up from me, there was a white family that owned a store. Mm-hmm. And his mom used to always talk about his son. His son was going to the University of Georgia. And she was so proud of it. And I was a little girl, and I would not believe that I would end up going to the same place.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, that is pretty crazy.
I said, now I think about Donald Harris. That name was Harris. Mr. and Ms. Harris, they had the little store. But my dad would not allow us to go in and out of it, because there were times when he complained about the kids stealing stuff and things like that. And he said, you don't need to do that, because my dad was an extension worker. He worked for the government. Mm-hmm. And we had a little bit more money, I would think, than the average family in that area. But the kids that live over near the school, I can't think of a single white family
anywhere near
that lived in that area. I bet some live further on down near Crawfordsville.
Near Crawfordsville. Okay, cool.
But right in that little Springfield community. Now, Tara ought to be able to tell you that more than I can. She probably remembers what her mom said about it, but I'd say that it wasn't.
Okay.
And there was another store down on the other end, that same road that went by our house, where 2 other white stores were. And amazingly, as I remember, one of the stores, white, they were a little bit more difficult and treated you a little different. Mm. The one across the street, I remember her name even now, Mrs. English and her husband. they had come from a northern state.
Oh.
And
Okay.
they were they tell my mother bartered with eggs. And they would say, Ada, anytime you bring the eggs in, I'll be happy. And she sat and talks. I remember, now I don't remember the man, what was the man, the other man? They were across the street from each other. But I wonder if it's listed, they were in a little area called Lyonsville. But it's probably no way you could find that. Lynes, I think that's how it's spelled. I don't know, it might be spelled Lineville,
Okay.
Lyonsville. But it was nothing but those two little stores, so it's probably not listed anywhere as
Okay. I might be able to find that. Maybe I might be able to find like some deed records or something. That's kind of interesting, though.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of reflect, you know.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's pretty cool. So you've mentioned, so you went to the school K through 7, and then you had all of your siblings also attended Springfield for a little while, or were they much older than you?
Until
they
they
all
graduated.
Until they graduated, all of them. Okay.
Now all of them did, because my older sister, my older brother, we were still in school when it closed. You know, we went down to, the three of us went down to the school.
Okay.
Now the sister that finished, at that time the school was only going to the 11th grade.
Oh, okay.
And my sister that was finishing the year it closed, she said to Dad, I don't know whether Clark College, you heard of Clark in it.
Mm-mm.
Clark Atlanta University.
I have heard of that, yeah.
Well, then they merged. She went when it was just Clark. But now Clark Atlanta University here in the city. She wanted to go to that school, so she decided, with my dad's approval, that she would go up to Greensboro, because that high school went to 12th grade.
Oh, okay.
And then from 12th grade, she went to college, went to Clark Atlanta University.
Okay.
So our school, it was interesting. I was telling somebody the other day how, I don't know, that school got a lot of principals. Naturally, they were black. We got a lot of teachers and principals from the Atlanta area, because the school, one of the principals I remember, Mr. Wilson, he came down with his children, and the little boy liked my sister back in in elementary school, and they never forgot each other all the way through school, on through college, and then when they both got out of college, they married each other.
That's pretty great.
I think that's kind of cute, because my sisters laugh about how he knew a shortcut to come through the woods, but he whistled a lot. And they said when they heard that little whistling go, poof, he said, now, here come Anna through the woods to date you. She was glad because she liked to.
Oh, that's sweet. So Mr. Wilson, do you remember his first name by chance? That principal's first name?
Oh, I can't. Mm-mm.
That's okay. Do you know any other principals? Were there any others that you can remember their names or anything like that? Or even any teachers you can remember their names?
Oh, I'm trying to think of Mrs. Bates. We had a home economic department in that school.
Okay.
And this lady was named Mrs. Bates, I think, but I can't remember her first name.
Okay.
But my sister knows they did a lot of stuff. It was a beautiful setup in there. She taught them how to cook. They would make clothes. They would do flower arrangements. They did a lot of stuff in the home economic department. See, that was unique back then. Mm-hmm. Most black schools just taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and English. And
I remember reading that about Springfield, that they had vocational specific trainings too, where it's like it was work specific training, not.
And it could have been. I don't know. I don't remember a shop for guys. It could have been in there, but I know because my sisters were very active, and my older brother he left for Army when I was a little girl, so I wouldn't have known what he did.
Okay.
But my sisters, I know they cooked and, occasionally would have stuff that they would bring home and they would sew. And,
That's cool.
And kids from all over came, as I said earlier, to get their families who could afford. Some families couldn't afford to transport them. We had no transportation.
Yeah.
There was no transportation available. So the next thing they tried to do is see if they could board kids. And some families let them probably stay for little or nothing. Just had the girls to do work in the evening, help out.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What about, do you happen to know when Mr. Wilson or Mrs. Bates, do you happen to know how old you were, or maybe what grade you were in whenever they were there, just to give me like kind of an idea of a year that I could maybe find out?
I was young. I'm
young?
going to say I was probably about 3rd or 4th grade.
For both of those?
I would go with my sisters to school, and they allowed me to come to school when I was 5. But that was not kindergarten.
Yeah, not quite. I think kindergarten is what
So they didn't have kindergarten. But they didn't have kindergarten back then. But they let me come to school when I was 5.
And you were about 3rd grade whenever Mr. Wilson and Mrs. Bates were
there? So after about 3rd or 4th grade, see, my sisters, gosh, I'm thinking about my older sisters. My sisters was, they were about 15 years older than, the oldest one was probably 15, and then 14 and 12. They were good bit older.
Okay.
And the one thing I can remember about my sister that was maybe about 10 years older, she talked about this black teacher that they had that was from Atlanta, and he was talking about this magazine that had black people in it. And said I don't know what his name was, Mr. Dawson or something, I can't remember his name. But they would say, bring the book. We don't believe no black people in no magazine. And it was Ebony. And so he said, when I come back next week, I'm going to bring it. So he would bring the old Ebony. And they said they love reading those books. They had never seen magazines that had all about black people. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure it was available. But where we live, you didn't see them on the racks down in the stores. They didn't put nothing.
Yeah, definitely not there. But like Atlanta, that makes sense. Atlanta would have.
But we didn't
like
get to come to Atlanta. And then when we came, we visited relatives. We didn't go out to stores.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
But I think these teachers that came from Atlanta are really. It gave the blacks that were there a lot more experience about things that were in city. They gave us inspiration to want to do something more than just the little area that we lived in. That's why you always need somebody that's got a little bit more insight and aspiration to work with people who have not been exposed.
Sure, yeah.
So that was one of the main things I think helped those of us who went there to perform as well as we did. Like in my family, like 5 of us was educated with college degrees.
And that's a pretty big deal, yeah.
And I was probably the only one that went on and got a MS and a ESD.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay.
But it was quite a terrific place. I probably didn't think that back then.
Nobody thinks that. It's always retrospect. So was it always called the Springfield Log Cabin School then?
Yes, as far as I know.
As far as you know? Okay. So always called that. I'm always curious to know if I can ever find it under any other names. Or I know Terry refers to it as the Log Cabin School, just the Log Cabin School sometimes, or just the Log Cabin. Do you know if everybody did that, or if that's just a colloquialism that Terry picked up maybe? Or do you think other people did that?
They just refer to it as the Log Cabin School. Now
Okay. So you said that the Springfield community was predominantly black.
Yes, I'm trying to sit here and think if there were any whites anywhere on those roads. I can't think of any.
And you're thinking that it's at least 5 miles or so before
Yeah.
you actually start seeing any other white
Yeah,
families
when you
around.
get further on down, I'm going to just estimate that school was probably 5 to 7 miles out of Crawfordsville. Terry might be able to tell you. I've never clocked it when I come and go to church.
I'm picturing it in my head, and I think about 5 to 7 sounds about right when I can see it on the map.
When I think about how long it takes you to come.
Yeah, how long it takes to get there.
It's not very far, but it's still not right around the corner either.
Sure, yeah. So it was always called the Springfield School. So the floor plan of it is kind of interesting. The way that the building's built, it's got sort of a T shape to it. Have you heard of a Rosenwald school before? Do you know much about Rosenwald schools?
I've heard of it. Where is it?
So Rosenwald schools, let me look at my notes really quickly here. Rosenwald schools are these really interesting schools that were founded by, I believe it was, so it was a project that built more than 5,000 schools, shops, and teacher homes in the U.S., and it was primarily for the education of African American children. And almost specifically in the South. I don't think there's any record of Rosenwald schools going further north than like Virginia. So it's pretty much all South. It was a partnership with, I believe it was Julius Rosenwald, and he was the part owner of the Sears Roebuck. He was one of the first owners of the Sears Roebuck.
White guy.
Yeah, and it was him and then Booker T. Washington. So the two of them, they kind of created this seed money fund for building schools for African American kids and making sure that K through 12 was pretty much covered for their schooling. And so I'm looking at some of my notes. It was the intention was that they were required to attend the segregated schools, but the hope is that eventually it would lead towards sort of that more civil rights movement that came about whenever desegregation happened. So this was kind of a really early premonition of the desegregation of schools, and that's kind of what a Rosenwald school was serving. It was just the purpose of making sure that black kids got access to education. And so this school, I have no record of it qualifying as a Rosenwald school, so I don't think it was actually funded by that, since it was just primarily the black people in your community that were building the school pretty much. But it looks a lot like some of those Rosenwald schools. So,
really?
Yeah, it looks a lot like some of them.
Where would the closest one be to?
So, how far is Hancock County from Tolliver County?
Oh, that's the next county.
It is one of the next counties over? Okay, so I have some notes about, I think it was, figure out where it was. So it was in, there it is. So the building's floor plan it says there's some notes on here that Terry had that she found it says that the school was built kind of based out of one from Hancock County that sort of mimics a Rosenwald school. So there was a Rosenwald school in Hancock County. But I don't, I'm guessing you may not know anything about this just because you were so young when it was built, but do you happen to know anything about if the school got any kind of government funding, or if the school got anything from that kind of a fund, from the Rosenwald Fund or anything like that? Because I don't think it was technically a Rosenwald school, but it looks a lot like one.
I don't think that at all.
No? Okay.
I think this was community funded.
All community funded?
And what was kind of interesting about it, when I talked to my girlfriend whose parents live up much closer to the school, it was kind of interesting that blacks owned all that property in that area around that school.
I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Because her dad, her dad and mom passed away, and their siblings did not choose to do as ours did, sell it. I didn't want to, but my older sisters and brothers that were living, they wanted to do it, so I didn't just object. Because maybe I could have appeased them if I had taken all of my savings and tried to buy it myself.
Sure.
But then I would have had to try to figure out how am I going to get some money out of it.
It's a lot of money, that you have to get back.
replenish. But now, this girl's family, they just kind of go in together and pay the taxes, because the taxes
Okay.
has gotten to be quite high since
Yeah.
they built that school down there in Crawfordsville.
Okay.
The taxes, I think, from what I've heard, the taxes has escalated a bit.
Do you know her name by chance? The girl that you're thinking of? Do you know her name?
Who?
The girl that her family did the taxes. and things like that?
Ernestine Johnson. That's why she talks about her aunt. Her aunt was very instrumental in helping with that school, I think, educationally.
Oh, okay.
Her aunt was one of the first they call them gene supervisors back in there, and her name was Mildred Turner. I don't know whether she had another last name. Mildred Turner, that's all I've known.
Turner sounds familiar. Is that Terry has family
Tara got a
members?
lot of information on
Okay. I
because
think
that's
Terry
what,
is.
when I talked to this girl, Ernestine, she and I chat a lot about things that went on back when we were children and stuff.
And Mildred is her
She
aunt.
keeps saying, I don't know why they're not saying, not gonna put much about my aunt. And she tried to do a lot there. And then when I didn't know this, and this is Ernestine telling me, that when she tried to do so much for the school and trying to get the money and books and things from down there, whoever the superintendent in Crawfordsville got her fired.
Oh my God.
And they brought her, she got another job somewhere else. I think Tara told me about this. She started another school in near Midway, Georgia. I think that's what Tara
Wow,
said.
very cool.
And then I knew her as, she was a very, because I think she went to Spelman back when it was,
Oh, like kind of first kicking sort of thing.
so
Okay.
she was one of the Turners that they are very close. A lot of, I'd say a good many of the people there were in that area. They didn't have long formal education, but they had exposure to what was available.
Sure, yeah. Do you...
And what they used, as an instance with my dad, they used whatever steps they could use to move up and do better. They, like my dad, and he knew how to farm. And when the extension agents would come, he was the first one to volunteer to show how this should be planted.
Wow.
And the first one to show that. And my dad was a great speaker. He knew how to put jokes into talking and expressing ideas about planning. And I wonder today how my dad got a job like he did with no further education, formal, like it had to do with his intellect.
And a lot of trust to bring
And a lot of
somebody in.
trust
Yeah.
and belief in himself and
Sure, yeah.
what he could do. And he was always searching and reaching and, proving himself to be better than what he was.
Very cool. So you said a minute ago, I keep breaking my pencil lead. You called them a minute ago. The like head teachers or whatever those were. It was Gene something. Is that what they were? Is that what you said?
They called them back then gene supervisor. I don't know what that meant. I guess it means something like curriculum specialist or something like that now. But they were kind of like over schools, dictating what kinds of curriculum they would have and really kind of running the school. They were maybe more like a principal.
More like a principal. Okay.
That's
So
what,
then-
I don't really know exactly.
Mr. Wilson would have been one of those. He would have been a Gene supervisor.
No,
or
he was
something?
not that.
Or was he more of a?
He came from Atlanta. They had more particular names. And
Gotcha. Okay.
So maybe in the Atlanta area, that's what he had attained as a principal position. So when he came to our school, he still called himself that same position.
Gotcha. Okay, but he was more of a teacher, really, than a principal, I guess. He wasn't one of the Gene supervisors.
He was more. I don't know. I can't remember what he did,
gotcha.
but they said he was the principal. By that time, can she tell you how many classrooms was in that building? I don't remember.
Off the top
I
of my
remember
head,
about 4, but I don't know if that's correct.
there were, so when I'm picturing it in my head, I can picture 2 on, if you're looking at it like a T shape, there's 2 on one side, and then there's another little one, then there's another little one. In between that main corridor that leads into the auditorium, there's another small one, and then I think one more big one. So I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's at least 5, if not 6, I think, technically, that were classrooms. I think maybe it just, I'm trying to figure out
They might have split that big room they had back there for, because you didn't see anything that looked like a home economic room or anything.
Not that I can tell, and all of it.
No, they had moved a lot of that stuff out.
Yeah, a lot of it was just kind of, it's just hard to even figure out what it is, just because a lot of it's just kind of stuff.
Yeah, I want to talk about that big auditorium and what it meant to me.
Okay.
When we were growing up, from little kids, I just remember they had some big heavy-do maroon draperies, just like in the the big tossers and all, and they could pull them. And all of us participated in plays. I mean, that helped us with, oral speech and getting in front of
confidence.
A lot. And then see all these community people who had children, they came, all the community people that lived there. So you can remember how that auditorium, it looked large to me back then.
It's pretty big still. I mean, it's still
that
a large
place
space.
would be filled.
Very cool.
With parents applauding.
So was there a stage then? Was there kind of a stage?
It was a stage. They take the stage out. No, we came up on a stage.
Yeah, there's not a stage there anymore, but that floor plan I mentioned from the school in Hancock, so the school in Hancock, it shows the outline of where they had a stage in theirs, and in the Springfield school right now, there's not a stage. So it's good to know that there is one, that they definitely modeled it after that, probably.
It had a big stage. We went up on steps. It wasn't very high, but we would go up from the back. And I remember they would give me little small parts when I was younger. And then as I grew older, I got longer speeches to say.
Very
cool.
But
I said kids now are not exposed to that.
Not really, yeah. You get to pick those kind of electives. Like if you are outgoing, then kids will choose those things, but most kids stick to like band or sports.
Yeah, they got more different things.
You have
See,
a lot
all
more
of
choice
us,
in it, yeah.
All of us had an opportunity. If you were in this play, you may not be in the next one, that production.
Okay, and so the stage was there the whole time you were there.
All until I left. I think when they put other projects, they used that building for many other things since I left. And I think they kind of modernized it to fit whatever
need it had at that
and
time.
Service they had.
Sure. Okay. Cool. So what about the actual? So we were talking a little bit about the rooms. Do you, as best as you can describe it, can you remember how the school was sort of laid out? Like what places were where? Because I know at one point there was supposed to be a room that was kind of dedicated to the younger kids, like the K through first or second, something like that, like really, really little kids. But then the other bigger classrooms for some of the older kids. But when I walked in, some of the rooms are still set up like they would be for 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. And then some of the rooms are just kind of diminished and I can't tell at all. Do you happen to remember, if you can walk me through kind of what each of those rooms was used as maybe, or if you can remember it at all?
I remember when you come in that end door, that room was set up for like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I can remember that.
The indoor that you're talking about, is it the door that faces the road? Is it that road that faces the main road, or is it the door that faces the church?
The faces the road.
That faces the road, okay. So from the door that faces
that was
the
like
church.
1, 2, 3, because it's interesting how some of the kids, even though I might have been like 2nd grade, it might have been 1 through 4. I can't remember. It was 1, 2, 3, or 1 through 4. But I remember the teacher would allow me, even as a young kid, she would allow me to call other kids spelling and tell whether they was that. Back then, they were spelling orally. You would ask them, say a word, and they had to spell
They
it.
just had to spell it out.
They had to spell it orally. Okay, yeah, you getting it looking.
So here's the road. This is the church. This is that main front door that faces the church.
Uh-huh.
And then this is I know this one is the auditorium. Ooh, can't spell today. We were just talking about spelling and I can't do it very well. So there's this main corridor that goes all the way
And
down through
there's back here, this was kind of like the activity. We had a super basketball team. My brother played on.
Wow.
Oh, some of them boys were good.
Okay, activities area. So there was
That's what they did back here. They had basketball goals.
basketball goals. Sort of like an activities area. Was it for all
and
the
wasn't
kids?
an elaborate. It wasn't an elaborate one like you see today.
Sure,
but
yeah. Were there any kind of playground equipment or anything like that on the site? Nothing like that, really?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Just basketball goals. Was there like a concrete pad or like a asphalty sort of pad or gravel something that they used to play basketball on, or was it just?
It was
playing
the goal and the nets, but I think it was just packed dirt. You know,
just packed dirt. That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
It could have been cemented. I can't remember.
Okay. I feel like, based on the amount of money that the community had, I feel like packed dirt would make sense because at least it's something that's already there. You guys didn't have to pay for that kind of extra thing. But knowing that the boys were pretty good, I wouldn't be surprised if there was concrete. I wouldn't be surprised.
Later on, it might have been, but as I remember it, the boys were better in my younger years when I was 4th and 5th grade.
They got worse as they got older.
they weren't as good, look like later on. I don't remember them as well.
Okay. So this side, there are doors right here. There's a door right here. There's 2 doors here. Do you happen to remember when these doors were added, if they were added? Because I don't think these were original, the doors here, because the stage would have been right about here, right?
That's what I was about to say. I don't ever remember the doors being on
Okay. I feel like it was the 60s or maybe 70s when they
Okay,
added
now
the doors.
where are you showing the
stage right here?
Yeah, but I'm saying it seemed where was I'm trying to think where could the economic the cooking and the sewing and all of that department, because they had a bigger room somewhere. Looked like it was back here. As soon as you walk in here, it was back there.
It was there? Oh, okay. So there's a door that kind of goes into the auditorium right here. And it comes from this area that has like a bar kind of thing on it. It's got a bar and there's like a stove in there and maybe a sink or something. Could that have been the home ec area, you think? And it's a pretty big room, too. It's a big, big room.
Okay.
And that
so
maybe
they've
was
kind of
here?
redone it, yeah. The economic department was a big area.
Okay, so this might have been econ, home ec.
And they probably start using it for other kinds of things as they change. And
When it became like a community center.
No longer was a school. They probably used
Sure.
it for other kind of training stuff.
Maybe others.
Because she's told you all the different things that happened to that school after the children left.
Yeah, we haven't gone into a lot of detail on it yet. I'm actually going to sit down with Terry and do an actual oral interview like this with her too, just to really hash out everything, and that'll be a good 3 hours probably, because Terry can talk about Springfield School. I love it. She can talk about that place. But she's told me a little bit, but not really full details just yet, but we're getting there. So
Yeah,
far.
because she might have been telling you what her mom, because she don't remember.
That's true. Yeah, she could have just been telling
She
me
didn't
something from
actually
Mom.
attend it herself, but she knows probably what her parents said.
Okay. So there is a door, like I said, right about here that leads into the auditorium from this room. Then there's another door on this side. Do you happen to remember what this room was or anything like that?
I remember the older children, the ones who were like 10th, 11th grade, they were in that upper end.
Okay.
And the younger children were back in this lower end. And I guess I guess the middle-aged children were up in some of these rooms up top.
Okay. Because there's right now there's a bigger room kind of like right here, and then there's two smaller rooms. But this room right here, this used to be one big room, right? I believe. And then at one point, like this one has like a bright green carpet in it right now or something like that.
Right, so that might have been an office for somebody.
Maybe, yeah. And so if I'm not mistaken, this little wall in between here, I don't think always existed. Mm-hmm. I think this was one big room. But either way, you think that this back half might have been some of the older kids?
Yeah, that's what I think. I remember.
And then up here, this is kind of the same thing. There are some bathrooms there are some bathrooms right back here, I believe. There's 2 bathrooms. And then there's this room. I can't remember what that one looks like off the top of my head. Do you happen to know? So this one was younger kids.
Yeah, that's all I can remember. I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
I just remember going in this room, and then as I got older, I went up.
A little further down.
I went further down.
Okay, and so the middle kids were just.
And then by the time I left, we were just going to the 7th grade, so I was probably down. I don't know when they dropped those other grades. Now that I don't remember. But when I left, the 7th grade was the top grade they had.
Okay. So when you left, the last year was 7th grade.
Well, I started down in 50. I finished high school in 56. So I went there 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. I went there 5 years.
Okay.
So let's take 5 from 56.
So if you graduated 56, you probably started there at like 50, 51, something like that?
Something like that.
Okay. So you probably left Springfield around 50-ish. I promise I can read my notes even if nobody else can.
You did a good job, though.
So that means if you were there for the 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and then kindergarten, or somewhat kind of kindergarten, you were there for about 8 years. So you probably started in about...
I probably started at 5 because I wanted to go to school. Now, can you imagine a little 5-year-old trying to walk? So my older sister must have been very patient with me.
So you started there around 1942-ish then, probably? You were like 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there, maybe?
Yeah, because I was born in 38.
38, okay.
So 40, that's 2, 40. It probably had to have been closer to 43.
43, okay.
Something like that, because I was born in 38, 40, 41, 2, yeah.
Okay, so 43-ish then. Okay, that definitely helps me lay out some of this. So it's just younger kids, somewhere in the middle-aged kids, and then the older kids. Uh-huh. And then by the time...
And see, this didn't last a long time. I guess, I don't know whether it was fewer kids. I don't know why. But my sister, that was I think she's, was 8 or 9 years older. She was probably among the last ones to leave at 11th grade, I think.
You know, could the war have had anything to do with it? The Second World War, you think that could have had anything to do with it? Maybe?
I don't remember why.
Maybe kids were getting drafted. But I don't know if black African Americans or black kids, I don't know if they were technically considered drafted, but I don't know. I'll have to do some research. But maybe it was the World War is the reason they kind of knocked those older grades off.
Army, after my brother left high school, he went into the Army.
Okay, so maybe it was partially due to the war, maybe partially due to education needs, maybe.
Could have been done. When was the recession? I forgot. I remember we couldn't buy flour. Do you remember? You don't remember any of that, do you?
No, I think there was the recession in the 20s. That was the Great Depression.
You were too young.
That was the 20s, yeah.
Or not even born.
I was born in 98.
Oh, gracious. And when I was talking to a guy that was at the clinic, and I told him when I bought a house, he said, God, you bought a house 20 years before I was born. I said, oh, God. I can't believe that, you know.
I mean, my parents, even my parents, I think my grandma, if I'm not mistaken, I'm from North Carolina originally. My mom was born in
Now my ears are clogging.
Oh, sorry. My mom was born in 1970. My dad was born much before my mom was, but he was born in 1956.
God,
so he was much older than that. But I think my grandmother was born, I want to say she was born pretty close to when you were, if I'm not mistaken. And then one of my dad's parents, they were both
So your grandmama would be what, my age?
Right about your age, yeah. And then, that was on my mom's side. My dad, because he was so much older than my mom, he's like 14 years older than her.
So where's your hometown?
Hickory, North Carolina. I don't know if you've heard of it. Furniture capital area of North Carolina.
Oh, Carolina.
Yeah,
okay.
North Carolina.
But you after high school, you came to Georgia.
After high school, I went to Western North Carolina. So I went to like the Asheville area for my undergrad, and then I came to Georgia for my grad school.
Okay.
So yeah. But my grandparents are about your age, but my dad's parents are actually much, much older than that. They were much older when they had kids. But they were born in the early 20s, I believe. So I think right about my grandparents' age is whenever all of this was kind of happening. So that puts a little bit in perspective for sure. Pretty cool. Do you have any grandkids right now?
No, I never married, so I don't have any children.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I feel like that's pretty uncommon for a lot of women your age to have not married. Do you think?
Yeah, all of my sisters married. During my age, most people married.
Sure.
They don't marry as much now, but back in my time,
it's definitely becoming uncommon to get married for sure. So we talked about the rooms. We talked about the landscape a little bit. You said that there were sort of activities here. What else was the land around this used for? Because I know the church that it's facing.
I'm going to have to get a little closer.
The church that's right here, that's down sort of facing the school. So the church has been there a while. Do you know what everything else was that was used around the school? You said that this was kind of the activities area over here. Do you know what, like, this whole green area was used for? Was it always grassy? Was it trees? Was it, was there any, like, parking area kind of in that vicinity? Or you mentioned there was no transportation. So do you know what else any of this was used for around the school?
Okay, there was a man that owned a little store up here.
Oh, right by the church?
Out from, you have to walk down here, and there was a road coming up by that church.
Oh, okay.
You probably noticed it. It's a road going down here. He had a little store that sat over there.
Okay. Was it a general store, or was it a hardware store? Was it, I don't know, what other kind of stores?
I'm laughing because all I can remember is moon pies.
Like every other 5-year-old does.
The kids went in there. He had everything that a kid would want.
Okay.
Which was not the best thing to have. You ever heard of moon pies?
Heck yeah, I have. I love moon pies. They were my favorite thing until I was about 12, probably. I loved moon pies.
I didn't think they lasted that long.
Yeah, they're still making them. They're still pretty popular. They've got
those things were made back in the 30s.
Yeah, they're still making them for sure. They've gotten smaller since I was.
Oh yeah, because we got a big one.
I remember when they were like this big.
He sold a lot of kids stuff, but I think I called it a good. Would you call it goodware? Where you just sold a variety of things.
Oh, just like a general.
Whatever he thought, it probably was whatever the community came in and asked for. Needs. It probably had to do with maybe sold hammers or whatever those people in that area would come in and want.
And did he build this?
Because I didn't look around in the store to see what else was in there. I don't remember.
Okay. Do you know maybe how long it had been there? Or do you think it was there? Was it a pretty new store? Was it put there because of the school? Or had it pretty much always been there, do you think?
It was there from the time I could remember.
Just as long as you can remember? Okay.
Yeah, one of the community, what was his man? Going up to one of the black guys that lived right next door to the store, I think. He had, a lot of black people had little small stores. You wouldn't, the store itself was probably no bigger than they started here, maybe that much. You walked in it like this and had stuff on this side and stuff on that side. It was a small little store.
Do you remember his name? Who owned it, you said?
Oh, them.
I'm asking you a lot of hard questions.
It's a familiar name. I just can't call it. I can't recall it right now. I can't really call it.
No problem.
And you want to know what was out here?
Yeah. Was there, so the area in front of the church, there's a little cemetery sort of thing right here right now, I believe. Or is it up here maybe? I don't remember.
Yeah, there was cemetery back here. This
back
is
here?
church.
Okay.
All up on this hill. Because people right now, when they want to go to the cemetery, they drive down this road.
That little side road, okay. So
And they come up behind the school. The hearse comes up behind the school because that's where my mom and my dad are buried. My brother, all of them are buried back. See, you don't have enough space, but it's back here.
Back there, okay. So it went all the way.
That's the graveyard. And see, back then they had, like the Chapman family, the Turner family. It was about 5 well-known families. Chapman family, the Turner family. I can't think of another one.
I can't remember
It
any
was
names.
about 5 families.
Davis?
And they used to
Davis
kind of
family?
section it off. They were buried in this little area. They were buried in that.
Oh, like
area.
family plots or
Yeah.
something kind of like that? Okay. That's about 3 more. What about
Carrie
Davis?
know more about what's the name of those families up there.
Okay. And so the little road kind of led towards that way, towards the cemetery.
Yeah,
It
now
went
this
around
is
the
the
school.
main. I would consider this the main street.
Yeah, the main
Like,
road. Sure, okay.
Because this street keeps straight on down here to Crawfordville.
Okay, cool.
And you got a little small road comes up here.
It's a very
Right
tiny
by
road. You'd almost miss it if you weren't looking for it right now, but yeah, I
You
do
would, because
recognize it.
it's grown up.
It's definitely grown up, but I think I know what you're talking about. I feel like I can still see sort of a path kind of there.
Kind of like,
I think I
but
can
the
still
hearse can kind of bump over it, kind of like.
Okay, it's pretty steep through there. That was probably pretty hard to get through. Yeah, it kind of goes down.
But they
towards
have
the
no
church.
other way. Now there's a cemetery for some of the families right down below the church this way.
So a
back
little further
here.
down.
Now those people just come down the drive, their families. The Atkinsons, and I'm trying to think of some of the other families that are back in there.
Was this church always only attended by Black people or by African American families and things like that? Or do you remember a time where it was ever integrated? No? Okay, interesting.
No, it's never been white. It's always been. But I don't know who built that church because it had to have been there. I'm amazed at how well it looks, and those people in that area keeps doing things to it.
I thought it was much newer when I went to see the school and I saw the church there. I thought it was much newer until I was looking at some aerial photographs of the area, and I can trace it all the way back to 1952. But then 1952 is as early as I can go. So I can't get anywhere earlier. So I'm like, that had to have been there a while before that. But it looks in pretty good shape.
Well, how did it look in 52? I can't.
In 52, it's about the same. It looks pretty much the same shape, relatively. I think there's some stairs on it.
Now they've added
aren't
that
there?
back onto the church.
Yeah, it was about the
for
same, but it's a
serving
little bigger.
meals.
Okay, so
And they have done a great job. They asked for monies from those of us in the cities and their regular members and all, I guess, any person that would contribute. And they said the seats that we were sitting in, the pews, were the original. Now, that's what blew my mind. So
Wow.
I can't wait to get back down there for a Sunday in August. That's when I go back to see the new. They sent us pictures and thank you notes
Oh, that's lovely.
for helping us secure, because they
Very
needed the
cool.
help of those in the cities to help buy those pews. But they got all red shiny. It is. There's my girlfriend and I who talked. She said, that church looked better than any of the black churches in that area. But I can't really say that because I went to a funeral at the other church. Blacks keep their churches up very nice, I think.
I think, spirituality and religion, it seems like most of the time when I read about it for African Americans.
I don't know, it might, come.
Religion seems to
Okay, then when I pop it out, see, I got tubes in there.
Sure.
And when I pop it, I can hear, okay.
Okay. So religion seems to be it plays a really big role for a lot of African American families, especially way back in the early 1900s. So with families like that, I think I read that the Springfield School was built because of the church getting too small for the amount of kids that were enrolling in the school that they had there. So the school, was it still really a big part of Springfield School even after? Like, was there still a really active relationship between the church and the school? Or do you know anything like that? Can you remember any relationship with them?
No. So what you were saying, they taught school in the church. Probably so. Is that what they...
I think that's what Terry has in her notes. Yeah, I think I remember reading that.
Probably so. That makes sense. Okay, because I think they said, because Mildred said, we don't have adequate schools for our children.
Yeah,
and she was an inspiration, to consolidate or get my dad and all the other people in the area who could help afford to do it. So you're probably right. I just never thought of that. I think you're probably right.
Okay, cool. Okay. So, do you remember, have you ever heard of Murden High School? Murden High School?
That's where I went.
That is where you went? Oh, okay, so it was called the Murden High School.
That's the name of the high school I went to. I finished Murden High School. You did
finish there? Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so you called it the Crawfordville High School. But it was
Crawfordville was a white school.
That was the white school up the road. Got it, okay.
I remember.
Seville.
The Murden was a name given to the black school.
Okay, so I can't remember.
But I don't know what they call it today. I don't know what. See, they built a larger school. There's no more black and white, as I understand.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Not now. So then Murden High School. So I love that you told me that. I'm so glad I know that. So Murden High School, they had this thing called the Murden High School protest or the Murden High School boycott. Do you remember anything about that?
That started after I left, maybe when I was away in college. But I know very well a lot of the younger kids that was very active in that. I talked to them.
Okay.
You probably, when you're talking, you're going to hear about Bates. He was one of the younger one that, I'm trying to think his first name. He passed away a few years ago, a younger person, younger than I am. But I kind of, I'm laughing because I kind of remember when they were doing that protest, they were able to get Dr. King, and he and my brother-in-law was very good friends, and I would be over visited, and he would say to me, because people ask me, did you know Dr. King? I said, I knew Dr. King very well.
That's amazing. That is
because
very cool.
A lot of people think that, when you're from Atlanta, you're not necessarily, I said, yeah, I know him very well. He would say, all right now, Marva, we're going to need some protesters. We're going to be walking on Saturday or whatever time. I said, no, Dr. King, I don't think I can go. But they mobilized Dr. King from here to help them, figure out how they were going to do it or what they were going to do. But that was after I left high school.
Yeah, I think it was I want to say it was in the mid-50s maybe when the Murden High School protests were happening. So you were at least college age by that point. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I finished the first page of stuff. Who took care of the school? Do you happen to remember anybody who took care of the school? Like, who mowed the grass, or who was a handyman that would come around and fix like a light bulb, or if something broke, they would come by and fix it. Were there anybody that you can remember who used to come by, or was it all the community that did that, or?
You really, when I think about it, I can't think of any particular person.
Okay.
The one thing I can remember is I'm talking back to my girlfriend that's from down there. I didn't know this, but she said one of the things she told her aunt, we're talking about the aunt that was a gene supervisor, that she had to sweep that auditorium. That was a big. So I'm about to say, I believe they had a lot of the children to help clean up.
Oh,
She
cool.
said she was supposed to sweep that big auditorium. It was kind of like, I don't know whether it was punishment or she was late coming in or I don't know what she had done. And she said she was crying and sweeping. And so she said, I won't tell my aunt. It took me when I see my aunt again, I'm going to tell her, I'm not going to be at this school no more. And I wondered what happened to her because we were all the young kids. And then at that age, her aunt took her to like Boggs Academy or wherever that school was, like a private school.
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
But she was always back in our community when school was out and stayed with her mom and dad and all her. So I saw her all the time, when she was back home. But when school started, she went back with her aunt. So that's the only incident I can remember about who cleaned. I don't remember sweeping that necessarily, but I do believe that was part. I believe we had chores. Because I remember we had to empty the garbage can, a big old bin outside.
And they were like maybe age-specific
chores. And we
chores,
had papers that we had been using. I remember. Now, I believe the children did a lot of the cleaning, especially the larger ones. Now, when I was 8th grade, not 7th, I don't remember whether I bet by then we had, so I can remember bus drivers and stuff, but I don't remember a job. I bet we had one, somebody to clean. Some of the community men probably came.
Okay.
But I can't be sure. I can't recall anybody.
From the way that I'm reading and some of the research that Terry has, I can tell that it seems like it was probably all a community effort. Like, so-and-so down the road has a lawnmower and he can probably mow the grass. Or so-and-so down the road is pretty good at fixing things. I think they did it. We can ask that.
We get Mr. So-and-so to do it for so long.
Sure, okay.
Who will volunteer, and they just had a good spirit among them. Brother so-and-so, we hadn't had a chance to do this. Can we get you to do this? And, I think they did it more like that.
Okay. Very cool. That's helpful then. You said you remember so the people who built the school, it was predominantly people who owned a lot of land, who had, logs and planks and trees on their property that they could cut for the school. You mentioned that your brother-in-law's father owned a lot of the property around the area. Could you tell me his name by chance, or who your brother-in-law was that I could get that name from?
Chapman. I'm trying to think of what the dad was named.
I'm trying to figure out who was the person or people who gave all the wood to build the school. If you can think of any of those people, or any people related to them. Yeah, people who built the school.
I think that this is where I remember. I think they cut logs and went to the sawmill and had it cut. Not from one family, but whoever had. Now, like on our farm, we had a whole section in that one area with nothing but trees and logs. And even after my father died, my brother had a company go through there and pay him so much. They pay you all kind of monies to get that.
Yeah.
Because some of that hardwood they can't find other places but in that area.
For sure, yeah. Old growth trees are definitely, we're losing out on a lot of those.
That's what I kind of remember, that different families were responsible for so many logs. But now they might have bought some. I don't know whether they put money to buy the things they couldn't donate. I believe they probably did.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how much.
Because they probably had some things they didn't have, like screws and things that hold stuff together that they...
I think so. I think I remember seeing a number. I think maybe the community was able to pull together like $50 probably, which $50 then was quite a bit of money. Now it's like chum change, it seems like. My bills definitely feel like that. But I think then, I want to say it was like $48 maybe that they were able to get together. I think that's what I remember reading for the little things like screws and nails and some concrete that they could mix together and build and plaster over like brickwork and things like that. So I think maybe it was like $50 that the community could get together. But no, so you have no specific names you can remember or think of, or anybody who told you that, you know, they gave the wood or anything like that.
I wish I could think of Mr. Chapman's name, but I can't.
Who was Mr. Chapman?
You know, my brother-in-law might have been named for him John Chapman, but I don't know what's the dad's name.
So John Chapman was your brother-in-law? Ooh.
Yeah.
Which sister was he married to? Which of your sisters was he married to?
Ollie, but her name, my sister was named Ollie Hackney.
Okay. Okay. So I am curious about, and you might not know this because you were pretty young when you were attending the school. So what was sort of the social aspect of the school? How did it work within the surrounding white community? Did you guys ever have any issues with the white community having a school there, or were you guys kind of sight unseen? Do you ever remember having any problems or anything that you can think of? How did it work in the community surrounding it? Was the school just kind of there, or anything like that you can think of?
I really don't remember anything.
Okay.
I don't remember anything. Only thing I remember is when we went to the towns. It wasn't anything that was what I want to say. That was like, I guess almost anything they would say could be. I started saying degrading. But I used to always wonder why my dad, when they would say, "Hey, Miles, we good to see you," and he'd have to say, "Yes, sir." We said, "Daddy, you don't have..." So he said, "No, we don't want to start into trouble." I didn't understand why you need to say yes, sir, to them, and they're just saying, calling you by your name. Why you can't say, "Yeah, John, it's good to see you too." Mm-hmm. You got to say Mr. Willis or Mr. whatever their names were. But I don't remember anything. I think they kind of ignored.
Okay.
You know, if you all stay over there and be at whatever kind of school you want to, do whatever. I don't remember any whites try. They probably did, because Ernestine tells me that superintendent would not let cousin Mildred do much getting money from them to run the school. See, our problem was teacher tell you to read the book, and you'd read so-and-so. She said, "Marva, read." I can't read because the page is torn out.
Oh,
we had to get a second-hand book. So she said, "Pull over to somebody sitting next to you." So we were saying, will it ever get where we don't have to use these old torn-up books? They took all the old torn-up books from the white schools and sent them to us.
Did you guys have to pay for them? Do you know if the school paid for them, or were they just...
I guess they were
sent
part
to you
of
guys?
taxes.
Probably in taxes.
Now, we paid taxes on our property and land, and I think they took that. But why would they have sent us new books and thrown the old books away?
Yeah.
But other than there, white people back then, what they did was denied you access to things. They weren't out fighting you physically, but their depression for you were to say, "You are not going to move up because I'm going to hold this standard on you, and you are not going to get we're going to, maybe I wondered if somebody tried to build a store. What stores were on the backside in Crawfordsville? That was stores that people owned, like just the main highway. All the white stores was on this street or coming down. You couldn't build any. You couldn't go in, or you could go in them, but like cafes you couldn't sit. You could go in them, but you had to go around to the back. I never did that because I was not going to go around to the back, and then people had to fix your food. But there were a lot of, I'd say 8 or 10 on that black backside had those small stores in the Crawfordville area. Mm-hmm. And I remember my brother came home, the one I was talking about, from the Army. And I don't know, maybe he wasn't thinking, or he parked up there. And they waited for him to come back and hit him upside the head and say, "Nigga, don't you know you don't never park on this?" So he said, okay. And he got his car and moved it. I say, it's good they did it back at in that time. They wouldn't do that to a black now. It'll be bad news, I believe. I don't know. A lot of blacks probably wouldn't want to start up something. But they would never do it today, I don't guess. But that's what I was saying. They didn't come into that. I remember. I don't ever remember them coming in to our area during the thing.
Okay.
That the depression was access to something like that lady wanted, Mrs. Turner wanted to upgrade the educational part for us. She wanted to stay in our community, but she had to leave because that superintendent, Ernestine can remember his name, but Mr. Whatever, he was down there forever. But he told her, "Mildred, don't come here with no stuff. We ain't gonna be sending none of that back out to them black people." And so the next thing she knew, she had lost her job there. And some other man, white guy that knew of her because her reputation was good, say, "Come up here and work with me. We know about your reputation." And he hired her, so Ernestine said, in another location, maybe further north or somewhere. Because like I told you about the lady who had the store across from another man, there were many whites mixed in who had kind hearts. And they really didn't want blacks to be treated, but they didn't have enough, what is it that you need to stand up? It reminds me kind of like with this going on in Ukraine. You got to have a lot of
people.
Just belief and not worry about what's going to happen to you. Because if you're worried about what's going to happen to you, you're not going to always do what you can do for the next person.
Some selflessness, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta feel like their success and mine is just as important as you. Because you think too much about what's going to happen to me, you go say, "I'm not going to do that. I'm afraid to do it."
Sure.
So I think more whites might have done more. And those who had a different outlook, a different heart about what black people were just other people. They acted differently.
So you mentioned a minute ago that like your dad had sort of a relationship with some people in the community, some other like white people in the community. Was he pretty well known for what he was doing in like your community to the white people? Or was he kind of half ignored too? Did he have any maybe friends, quote unquote friends, that were white people? Or did he have any people that, was he just pretty well known in the white community, or was he just kind of ignored too, or just known of, I guess?
I think he was known of, but no white friends.
No friends, okay.
Known of, I think they knew of him because when he would go to the banks, he had no problem getting whatever he needed because he ran his farm and he might need so many sacks of seeds and so much of this. They respected him and knew him well in the banks, in the hardwood stores, all Union Point. We went to Union Point primarily. I know this is off the subject, but years later, what year was this? It had to have been in the 70s. And I'm trying to think of what the banker there, Mrs. Stewart, we had to say who we all were going on a trip to Europe. My sister and I, that was in 70. And we didn't know this lady that organized it. She got people from all around, white lady. My sister and I were the only two blacks. And we had to say where we were and what our names were. So I said Marva Hackney, originally from. I can't believe that. You mean you Miles' daughters? So we said, yes, we are. That lady was done. She said, it has taken us the last 15 years to save our money. I had been planning it about a half year, but the lady that was going with me, the other black lady, something happened in her family, like a death or something. She couldn't go. And I came home so sad. I told Nell, I said, I'm not going to be able to go on my trip because the lady can't go. She said, I'll go. So Nell told the lady, she said, I just knew it last week or so. That was just so funny but they were real nice. Now, what I'll say is, it always seemed that way. The lady who was a banker, she looked like a little bit more friendlier and nicer to us. The other lady, Miss Lunsford, she ran dry goods store, like where you sell flour and all.
Sure, yeah.
And my mom would take the eggs there, and you could barter. My mom take eggs, and then Miss Lunsford would give. She wasn't mean to us, but she wouldn't say much. She didn't do much talking to us. But the other white lady, so we were just thinking, Neil and I said, now look how many years ago it was that we were growing up. And there was a big difference. And they were a lot older than we were, because they could still walk around. They were probably more my age, and I was more 30. Mm-hmm. And then Neil was probably 38 or something like that.
And that's Nell Chapman?
That was. She was married to Anna, the one I told you about, the principal.
Gotcha. Okay.
She was married to him. But it's a lot about what my daddy taught us about saving, and one of the things he always said to you, he'd ask me, where are you sitting in the room? And I say, I'm sitting wherever back. And his thing was rally to the front. Always sit up front. If you sit up front, you are not going to miss anything. You're going to be known. You'll get more opportunities to talk. That was his thing. Be expressive. Get to know whoever you're working with, the teachers.
That's a pretty cool one. Okay, so I've got kind of my last question is, do you remember any other students' names, like when you attended the school? Do you remember any friends you had, maybe their first and last names, or anybody who, Bear Cross is still alive that you would recommend that I speak to about this, that knows a lot about Springfield School or anything like that?
I know one young lady named Eunice. Oh, God. Stewart was the name. I know she got married to a young man in Chicago. Most blacks left the area down there after we finished high school, and most of us moved away. Some came to Atlanta. Some went to New York. My cousins, all of them went to New York. This girl went to families in Chicago. But Tara can tell you her sister has a PhD. Her name is Marilyn, but I don't know her maiden name. but she works on the committee.
Marilyn Stewart McGadney.
That's her.
Is that it? Okay,
That's
I got
her
her name
sister.
from Terry.
She and I were good friends in elementary school.
Eunice.
So
that's
she
her
finished
sister,
the
is
same year I did. Okay, when I called it others, I'm trying to think who Edith is passed away. Oh, wow. Look like when I started thinking about them.
I understand. They'll come to you when they come.
But most of them are deceased. I can't think.
It's unfortunate. I think
I can think a few more high school. About half of us from high school have passed on. But from elementary school, I know Princella is living, but she lives somewhere. I don't even know how to get in touch with her. She lives in Chicago or New Jersey or somewhere. Edith passed on. Who else would? When we left that school, it probably was no more of us than about 5 or 6 that were 7th graders. I don't look like I can remember a big group of us. It might have been more than that, but I can't remember.
Okay. What is I meant to ask you this too.
So yeah, Marilyn's sister should be, because I think she left Chicago. I think she lives in Savannah now.
Oh, okay. So she's still in Georgia at least.
Yeah, you could probably, her sister could give you her telephone number.
Okay, and Marilyn, she didn't attend the school, but she was...
no, she was too young. She was...
Yeah, she's a board member right now, though, for Springfield, I believe. She's one of the board members right now.
Yeah, I think for this project they trying to do.
Okay, and then she's also been involved, Terry told me that she's been involved in a lot of other civil rights activism in the area that you guys had, and so she already recommended to talk to her anyway. But it says that her grandfather was on the original board. With your father, probably. I don't know his name. I just have a note that says her grandfather was on the original board. It could have been Mr.
Casper Evans.
Okay. I think Terry gave me a list of all the board members. Or as many as she could find, if I'm not mistaken. I think I have a list of those people, so I'll go through
I don't know. I'm just some of the people in that area that the older members, I'm thinking about the older members in my church. Mr. Les Turner. This girl, my friend, her dad would be George Turner. I'm just trying to recall some of the older members in the church because it was really that kind of core group from that Springfield church. Because I'm sure that church was Bailey's responsible for spearheading it. Like you said, that school grew out of that church.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems like enrollment was getting so high with the church for the school kids who were trying to be educated, but the enrollment was just too high. They just couldn't hold that many kids anymore. So I was going to ask you too, what are all of your siblings' names? Can you give me all of them in maybe like an order, or if you know their birth year maybe or something like that?
I had to count back. It's like 3 years. Herman Hackney. That's my oldest brother.
Oldest? Do you about know how old he is, or maybe what year he might have been born?
You gonna have to let me count. Get my age. I'm gonna let you do that.
That's okay.
Count back about there's 2.5 to 3 years. So you're gonna be close to it. You get my age at 83 at the end. Because everybody's deceased now. Mm-hmm. I have it. Larry had it written to play numbers. He had me to do what you were having me to do. I recalled it and wrote, because he wanted to play their ages and numbers.
Sure.
So I made a list of it. But
that's okay.
Some of them I can remember that year, but
okay, no worries.
I have to go back and kind of juggle the numbers.
Sure, yeah.
Because I know there was 3 to 4 years, and I had one sister that died in between. But I can give you the chronological order. Next to him was Ollie. Her name is Chapman now, but it was, her before she passed away, but it was Hackney Chapman.
Okay.
Okay, next to her was Annie Nell, we called her Nell, Annie Nell Wilson. That was the principal's last name that was at our school.
Okay.
Okay, after her was Ruth.
I'm writing that you were the youngest. Then there's Ruth.
Hackney McMillan.
McMillan. Millen?
Huh?
McMillan, McMillan.
Millan.
Okay. Is that all 5 of you?
No, we got to keep going.
Oh, one more? Is
Okay.
there another one? Okay.
Now, Otelia, Otelia.
That's a beautiful name.
That's her name.
That's beautiful. I love that name.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Otelia Hackney Russell.
Russell.
Yeah, she was married to Herman Russell, who built a lot of Atlanta. Have you ever heard of H.J. Russell?
You told me something about this, I think.
Yeah, H.J. Russell construction firm. But both of them are deceased.
Married to H.J. Russell?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
he has a documentary built in Atlanta. He has a book out, too.
That was on PBS. We talked about
Yeah,
that on the phone the other day. That's what it was. I knew I recognized the last name Russell. I'm like, I heard that one somewhere, something. Okay, cool. Any more siblings, or is it
Okay,
just the
we
five
got
of them?
keep going.
Oh, okay.
We had okay, now the next boy, Miles Hackney Jr.
Miles H. Jr. Okay.
Okay, now you go to get closer to me. The next sister is Doris. Doris. Hackney Dixon.
Dixon, okay.
Now you're ready for Marva.
Now there's you. All right. Wow, you have a lot of siblings.
There's 8 of us.
That's a lot of y'all. I have a bunch of siblings too. So
But
I
yeah, that isn't
understand.
amazing. I don't think you could hardly provide. You think,
Yeah.
I don't think a family would be able to survive, but we probably, the reason I think we could, because if you had 8 children, you don't make enough money to.
Everything is stretched thin when you have
But
that
I
many
think what
kids.
made the difference is on our farm, we had a hen house. I guess the government must be. It was built with little coops back in the back for the chickens to get up and lay the eggs. We had a smokehouse. That smokehouse was built with vents in the top where you smoke your meat and you stored your stuff. Then we had a big barn that had places for all your hay and places for the cows to come in and get stuff out of the trough. So look at all we could get there on the farm. Milk, vegetables, what else? Fruits. We had an orchard right near the house. And I tell people about storing potatoes. Have you ever heard of storing sweet potatoes in like a hill made like a, what is a little tap, the little thing that Indians make? I can't think of the name, with the little top. When they go in, what's that little house with the little
Hey, TP.
teepee? I was
TP,
trying to
there we
think
go.
of
I was
teepee.
like, it's here somewhere. Hold on.
It wouldn't come to me. I know it's a little house. We make something like a little teepee and put the sweet potatoes on straw because we wanted to eat them all year long. And it's going to get wintertime. We have nowhere to keep these things. But isn't that amazing? We put them on a big pile of straw, and then we would put sticks up just like a teapot. Put that till they got heavy. Then we'd take old quilts, make maybe something that was rubber, I guess, and quilts and things that go round and round. And then I think it had a little vent in the top or something like that. Then we'd cut something like a flap. And you lay down kind of on the ground and pull a sack or something up, and you stick your hand. One of the snake didn't bite us. But I guess they couldn't get out of that. You reach your hand up there and pull the potatoes out all year long. So I was wondering how they did it. My mother we had a pantry on our porch on the back porch. All this was screened in. And we had a big patch, and that pantry would be filled with beans. She cooked sausages and put them in there. The smokehouse had hams hanging and pork for bacon, and the hens were laying eggs. That's the only way I can see they took care of those. And with cows, we were milking cows all year round. So can't you see how maybe that was a good, if you didn't live like that, you...
Yeah, and not to mention having that big of a farm, you also needed a few more kids to be able to help make it too.
You were right. My dad would have been able to produce stuff on the farm because and I used to always say to my mom when she would be out there working, she said, keep working. I said, no, my dad just left. He'd like to have him a new car. My dad just left in the car going to some kind of meeting or something. They didn't dress necessarily in suits. He'd have on like a khaki shirt and khaki pants or wherever he was going. But it was always clean and have a crease in it. And she said, but he's going to his job. No, bring him out here to this field. I laugh about that now sometimes. I wanted him out there working like we were working. But I was so glad later in my years, before I got to high school, the theme went from grass and making stuff to, from farm, it went to making, growing season crops. You didn't do cotton anymore. That wasn't the thing. Even though we had a big cotton loft out at our, Daddy was teaching the upcoming things that you do on a farm. Wow, planting Lespadita, planting all kind of stuff to do hay and stuff like that. So you didn't have to pick cotton. I was so glad when they said that. Because they had them big old headed bugs. They were like worms on cotton. You ever heard of those worms on cotton? They got two big things like that on them. Mm-mm. And when they bite you, ooh, it stings. What do they call them? They're big worms that grow on cotton when you're out there trying to. But my dad had us to put a kind of, it was something like to cover it. I've forgotten the name of what was in it, but you'd have to drop it on the top of the leaf, because if not, the big old bugs would just eat the head of that bulb, that cotton. Mm-hmm. He wanted that big old cotton bulb to climb out, flower like that, a big one all over the whole plant. Mm-hmm. If you didn't get rid of those bugs, they're not bugs, they're worms.
Worms, okay.
What they call them? Cotton worms.
I don't know if I've ever heard of them or not. I didn't know that was a thing. I guess it makes sense. They're plants.
But you never heard of those cotton worms?
Never heard of that. That's cool. They
would go in and eat up cotton comes up on a bulb like that. Mm-hmm. First it starts out with a little tiny something down in here.
And it grows and
it grows up and then it pops open.
Sure.
But it would eat it while it's in its immaturity, while it's still a little.
Okay, so it couldn't actually make it.
And when it would come up, if it didn't eat it all, your head would be one-sided with most of this gone. It wouldn't be a pretty big round. You wanted to bust a cotton like this, so when you got it, it would come up. You'd have to take.
Yeah.
You ever seen a cotton field?
Yeah, I've seen it
before.
But
you never gone out there to pick.
Mm-mm. Not actually picked it before. That's interesting. Huh. I didn't know that's how it worked.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, see, that was years back when I was younger. He had cotton. But they went to terracing your land. You remember the years when the government paid so much money to farmers to convert that land to terracing so that they wouldn't get erosion?
Oh. I knew that there was terracing. I didn't know the government paid people to terrace their
I
land.
think they paid. My understanding was there were, there were people who came around, like my dad. Because our land, after that, if we had a sloping land like this, it wasn't a big slope. But if it sloped, they built the land up and put a terrace all the way around, go way down lower, put another terrace, and this would keep from the erosion. So part of my dad's responsibility was to talk about and encourage farmers to do that.
Okay.
And I think the government paid, CCA, I don't know why that name is coming to me, but I might be wrong. Was it ever a program called CCA back in I'm trying to think, I'm 38, but 34. Had to be like 45 before, right along the time of the war.
There was the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
That's what it is. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
So they did the terracing. They were part of that group. Okay.
Conservation. That's exactly what it is.
Civilian Conservation
CCC.
Corps. Yeah, it was a lot of the Corps members who used to do that. They would have leaders who were older, but a lot of the CCC members were like 20s and 30s. They were younger guys who.
Yeah, they would come out. They were the ones who would come out. Those younger guys. And I guess. I assume that they not only paid my dad, but they probably paid, it was like a surplus or what do I want to say, and added something to what you were getting to encourage you to do that for your land. Because they knew that was a big farming area in there where I lived.
Okay. Interesting. Very cool. I didn't know that the CCC did that. That's very cool. That's neat. Okay.
You know a lot to know all about the CCC. I knew it was something, and I heard them talking about it not too long ago about the government doing it. I said, that's the same thing I remember, but I couldn't. I knew it was CC. I was saying A, like association.
Yeah, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, they were part of a WPA era. I think it was, which president was it? I can't remember. It might have been Roosevelt. Roosevelt, maybe?
Well, then did you learn about this in school or just some of your outside reading?
Both. A little bit of both, yeah. I'm a big history buff, and especially because I like architecture, and a lot of architecture that we see, a lot of buildings that were built in the 40s were by CCC. They were built by the CCC and all those groups of men who went out and did that. But I didn't know they had anything to do with the agriculture and the landscape. I had no idea they were part of that, too. So it makes sense, though. I get it.
That's what I remember now. You know,
that's pretty cool.
There's a good bit of fall.
That's okay. You got something from it.
I guess I hope you've been able to get a little bit of information from the fall.
Sure, yeah. And I feel like I understand a little bit more about how Springfield worked in the community.
I pray that they are able to get foundations. That I'm going to talk to my nieces and nephew who runs my brother-in-law's company, the Russell. I'm going to see if they happen to know, because sometimes insiders can get stuff started more than if you just happen to know somebody who knows somebody.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm going to talk with them and see if they happen to know. But they're going to say, oh, Marva, I'm so busy running this place. I have no extra time to look up something you want me to look up.
I know. And I think Terry right now has a group. They're based out of Savannah, but they go all over Georgia. They're in Atlanta all the time. But it's called Landmark Preservation. It's a group that sort of does, I don't know if they're doing it pro bono. I don't know if they're doing it for free for you guys or not with the community center, but...
Well, she did say they were getting something done. Mm-hmm. She said they were getting an estimate. Somebody had to come.
Yeah,
so she said that man or somebody was coming in there.
That's Greg Jacobs.
Because they don't have any money. And if I said 100, 500, that's no money. That project needs a million and millions.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. But Greg Jacobs, he's the guy who's working with that firm to do it. And he's wonderful. He's absolutely willing to jump onto any project, no matter how busy he is. And he is the one who was doing the condition assessment. I think it was in November of last year. So they've been on it for about 4 months, 5 months now. So they've been on it for a while, but they're working to assess the building and see what kind of condition it's in. And the condition, which is part of the reason why I was able to walk through the building comfortably, is because Greg Jacobs said that the building, even though it's old, it's not in as bad shape as it seems like it is. It's doing remarkably well considering. It should have probably fallen in by now.
That goes to show you that people had good wills. You know what it is? They probably had built things themselves. It's great to imagine the ingenuity and that people had. My heritage and other people too who had to do things on their own. They figured out a way that makes things last, stand, build.
Yeah, and especially with a lot of those like old growth timber trees and things like that, all those trees just aren't grown the same way anymore, and so wood just doesn't last as well anymore, and a lot of practices are made by machines and they don't last as well anymore either.
I know, yeah. If it had not been a wood, that log cabin, I believe it had been built by a wood something. It might have just fallen on down.
By this point, or rusted too much to be usable unless
because we're talking about when I went down there in 50, what did I say, 52 I left?
56, I believe, maybe?
No, I finished high school in 56.
Oh, yeah, so you started there about 52, 51.
So I went to 8th grade there, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Got to count 5 years back.
So, about 52, 51, something like that, yeah. Wow.
So, now, it was in good shape, as I remember when I left in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And it probably was built in the 30s.
Yeah, it was built in... If I'm not mistaken, it was built in 38. It was built the same year you were born, if I'm not mistaken. But I think there was some stuff from Terry that might show that it was built in 36, which means it's just a little bit older than you are. But I think based on my records, I think it was built in 1938. So.
But that to have lasted and not
that long, it's a while. It's a while for it to have lasted. Yeah.
That would just be great to. I just wonder how many people would come back on their travels. Would they stop to really? It would have to put up something interesting and make them think this is a worthwhile trip, though.
Sure, yeah. Definitely talk to Terry. She has plans. She's got some stuff she wants to do for the building.
In there.
And they just got a grant, actually. She just told me, 2 or 3
But you know
days
what
ago?
they need to do is, you know how in a lot of places you go in and you mash a little button and they got talking people that tells you about...
Yeah, I think she does want to do something like that.
Yeah, interested in happened to you. But I remember some of the people.
It's pretty amazing. That would be cool, for sure.
I don't know how. Well, they could talk about the school even if they worked in that facility long after it was a school. Because there were a lot of things they did in it, like a daycare center.
It became a daycare center, I think, in the 60s. Before that, it became like vocational schools for a while, or part of a vocational school or vocational training program.
Yeah, they had some kind of training.
Yeah, then it became...
And it looked like it had some civil rights something, didn't it?
It did, yeah. That was part of the... so we're looking at this as a freedom school. Have you heard of a freedom school before?
Yeah.
So this was definitely a freedom school. We know that for sure. And this is what I believe the only freedom school in the state of Georgia, which is a really big deal.
That school was, because of the... so even... That's interesting that even down at the lower kids, they had a lot of them get up and go to want to get better facilities than what we had.
That's kind of what this nomination that I'm writing on the school is about. We're trying to explore that freedom school aspect a little bit more and understand more about it. Do you know much about it acting as a freedom school, or do you just believe it was, or anything like that?
Well, would that be associated with when Martin Luther King was going back?
Yeah, it was part of, let me look at my notes really quickly. The freedom schools were, I believe, in the 50s and early 60s.
I mean, what were some of the kinds of things they doing? Were that at the time they were marching? All I can say is that I knew Martin Luther King well because he was a friend of H.J. Russell.
Okay.
And when I would go, I'd stop by my sister's house. He would be over because my sister knows at that time had a pool in the house in the basement, and that's what in some of the books they talk about. He and a couple of his what you call the people that go with him all over. A couple of them would come over and go swimming just to relax, just to get away from the hammering of what it took to be a rider, and they would swim and relax and talk and laugh, and then they would go. But the time I never saw him swimming, but when the times I'd go by, he would just be there, and he said, "Now T, I know she's not gonna go back, but he said I think I might be." I said, "Dr. Key, I can't go." I said, "I can't do nothing like that." So he would just laugh and. We would talk about it, but that was about, I don't know what, was that considered a freedom school when he was there?
I'm not honestly 100% sure.
Before that.
So we think it wasn't, we don't believe it was a Rosenwald school because it didn't get any of that money that we mentioned earlier, but the freedom school aspect, I think, so freedom school started in 64 when the Civil Rights Act was passed. So it started in 64 officially, but the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the one that MLK was part of. So that he was part of that, which funded this school. So this is sort of like a precursor to the Freedom School, it seems like, and then it acted eventually as a Freedom School. So that's kind of where it came from in that aspect, I believe. I'm still kind of hashing that out. I'm trying to make sure that that's true before I write it down, but that's kind of the port of research that I'm kind of in.
Oh, yeah, you just say, as told to me.
As told by. So, okay, very cool, interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't think about that. But yeah, it was part of the SCLC, so it did have some civil rights activism associated. I think black students at the time, during that portion of the time, they were taught things like political awareness. So like things like rights and voter rights and things like that were being taught to them and stuff like that. So I think at one point it was used as a voter registration area as well for African Americans. So there's a lot that I'm still pulling out, trying to figure out exactly what it was used for, but there is some civil rights stuff definitely associated with the school. So, which definitely gives it a little more credibility to go as a National Register nomination too, because I don't want to say it's a hot topic because that sounds like...
He got this black hat. Now see, in Ukraine at that time, a lot of the people were from Russia. They were Russian accent. And, but I guess they had realized that the people over in Ukraine, since they were liberated,